Okay, so Tisha B'Av, I'll be honest with you, until this year, I don't know if you've had the same experience, but I found it rather difficult because, what did I have to mourn about? I was born with not just a silver spoon in my mouth, but an entire set of silverware in my mouth. I was born in a place where there was very little in the way of anti-Semitism. I didn't suffer poverty. I didn't suffer much in the way of anti-Semitism, the odd thing here and there, but not very much. I didn't feel any existential threat. And then suddenly, on Tisha B'Av, I meant to sit on the floor. I meant to cry. I meant to mourn for something that I never really experienced. I meant to mourn for the loss of something which I didn't understand, which I didn't relate to. And I had to say that my life now was so much worse than it had been when we had the Beit HaMikdash. And I had to also mourn for all the other tragedies that took place around the Tisha B'Av time. The expulsion from Spain was also on Tisha B'Av. We also mourn about, we have Kinnot about the Crusades. These are something which I read in history books. And what the best will in the world, I found it very difficult. I found it very difficult to relate to the day of Tisha B'Av. Ironically, the other day in the year, which I found and still find difficult to relate to, is Simchat Torah. Did I really feel that joy when I was dancing with that Torah? Or was it the whiskey speaking? Did I really feel a huge uplift because we'd finished the Torah? Or was it that I was looking forward to the fest we were going to have afterwards? And everybody's in a jolly mood. I found it difficult. Maybe that's my Ashkenazi sort of reserved nature. But I found this forced emotion on Tisha B'Av, the forced sadness on Tisha B'Av, and the forced elation on Simchat Torah. I found it very difficult. But this year, it's very different, isn't it? This year, we know what it means to have an existential threat. We know what it means to have massacres. When we read the Kinnot, one that I've chosen, you'll see later on, one that I've chosen is one that discusses the massacres of the Crusades. We know what it means to have a massacre. We know what it means for women to be raped and children to be burned alive. It's very, very real now. And this is what makes Tisha B'Av something that is so important for us throughout those ages when we thought we were sitting pretty. This is something that I've spoken about before, but I'm going to repeat it. A prophecy in the book of Zechariah, chapter 7. The people in Eretz Israel sent a message, the people in Bavel sent a message to Eretz Israel. When they started to rebuild the second temple, they sent a message saying, do we still need to fast on Tisha B'Av? Because we don't need to mourn for the Beit HaMikdash anymore, because we started to rebuild it. And Zechariah says, good question. Let me go ask Hashem. And Hashem says the following, I'll paraphrase. He says, I never asked you to fast. You're not fasting for me. You're fasting for yourselves. He says, what did I ask of you? I asked of you to listen to the original prophets. Speak to all the people of the land and the Kohanim and saying, when you fasted and mourned in the 5th month, that's Av, and in the 7th month, that's the fast of Gedaliah. For those 70 years of exile, was the fasting that you fasted for my honor? Was it for me? And when you eat and when you drink, is it not you who are the eaters and you who are the drinkers? Behold, consider the prophecies that Hashem pronounced through the earliest prophets. when Jerusalem and its surrounding cities were settled and peaceful, and the south and the lowlands were settled. And he says, listen to what the original prophet said when all was good, when everything was hunky-dory and Yerushalayim was settled and everything was going well. Thus spoke Hashem, Master of Legions, saying, judge with truthful justice and perform kindness and mercy towards one another. Do not oppress the widow and the orphan, the stranger and the poor, and do not think in your hearts of wronging one another. But they refused to heed, and they turned a rebellious shoulder, and they made their ears hard of hearing. So when Hashem is asked, should we still be fasting and commemorating Tisha B'Av because everything is going well and we're about to build the second Beit HaMikdash, what does he say? He says, I'm not interested in your fasting. I'm interested in you listening to what the prophet said. And those specifically those things that the prophet said when things were going well. Listen again. Judge with truthful justice. That's the first thing he says. What was going on this time last year? This time last year, we were fighting one another. Families were driven and riven apart because of this justice business that I don't even really fully understand. I don't even reckon anybody really fully understands the subject. Only you're either for it or you're against it, or at least you were last year. Justice, truthful justice. Judge with truthful justice. Perform kindness and mercy towards one another. We were not speaking the way we should have done to one another. There was hatred amongst our people, demonstrations, counter demonstrations, even violence, rotten words between one another. Do not oppress the widow and the orphan. I'm not making this up. This is all in Zechariah. Do not oppress the widow and the orphan, the stranger and the poor. Do not think in your hearts of wronging one another. This is all about us behaving as a family, as a people, as one. And so when Zechariah was asked the question, should we still fast? Do we still need Tisha B'Av? The answer was, well, you don't need to fast. I'm not really interested in your fast, says Hashem, but what I'm interested in is you behaving in the way you should behave. Because if you don't, it will all happen again. And that's what happened at the end of the second temple. Yes, they built the second temple. Very nice. And it lasted for 400 and odd years. But at the end of the day, what happened? What was it that caused the destruction of the second temple? Sinat Chinam. What is Sinat Chinam? Baseless hatred. What does that mean? It means that we weren't behaving properly towards one another. As Rabbi Weiss said on Shabbat, baseless hatred doesn't mean hatred for a stupid reason. It means for no reason at all. No reason at all. We have no reason to hate one another. We are brothers and sisters, and we have to act like that. And that's what the message was from Zechariah. And then in the very next chapter of Zechariah, he says like this. He says, after it's all over and we've destroyed you and you've been exiled, I'll bring you back. I'll bring you back. I won't ever forget you. And we've been the recipients of this. But then he goes on to say in chapter 8, in verse 16, he says, these are the things that you should do. You want to stay here? He says, these are the things you should do. Speak the truth with one another, and in your gates judge with truth, justice and peace. Do not think evil toward one another in your hearts, and do not love false oaths, for all these are what I hate. Ne'um Hashem. These are the words of God. It seems to me that because we could not relate ourselves to Tisha B'Av, understandably, because everything was going so well. And this was also predicted, was it not, in Parashat Hazinu? Vashamanta. Where's Ruby? Help me out here, Ruby. Vashamanta, Kisita, Va'avita. Yes, something like that. It was not in that order. Yeah, in Hazinu. Shamanta, Avita, Kasita. You got fat and corpulent and you kicked out. And that's what happened here. We became, one word, complacent. Why did October the 7th happen? Complacency. I'm not talking politics now, and I'm not talking military complacency. That will come in due course. Whether we were complacent militarily and politically is not for me to say. That will be dealt with by people who know far more about these things than I do. But there was a complacency about our Judaism as well, about our achdut, about all the things that Zechariah said are important. There was a complacency about that. Okay? It's not a coincidence that each of the previous sovereignties over the land of Israel has fallen apart in the third quarter of its century. After between 75 and 100 years of each of the previous sovereignties, it all fell apart. We're now 76 years in on this sovereignty in this land. The message to us is very clear. And that is what this Tisha B'Av is about. This Tisha B'Av, more than any other Tisha B'Av, certainly in my lifetime, this is what Tisha B'Av is about. It's about stopping and thinking, have we been complacent in the way we behave towards one another, the way we behave in our religious behavior, both to God and to man, but specifically to man. Zechariah does not say you didn't daven a long enough Shemona Esra. He didn't say you didn't use Kais Revi'i on Shabbos. No, he said that you weren't nice to one another. He says that you had bad thoughts towards one another in your heart. You wanted to wrong one another, and there wasn't justice in your gates. That's what Zechariah told the people and said, until you get that straight, there isn't really any point in fasting because it's meaningless without considering those things. So that's what this Tisha B'Av is about. This year, it's much easier for us to relate to the tragedies because we have our own very fresh tragedies here. We're going to spend some time now going through some of the Kinnot. Those of you who've got one of these sheets will see the ones we're going to do. I'll announce each one that we're going to do. Each one of the participants is going to spend 10 or 15 minutes going through each of these Kinnot. And the idea for us is to take away a message from each of these Kinnot. There is, I don't know about you, but when I've previously sat on the floor and read all these Kinnot, I was looking at my watch every 5 minutes, thinking, when's this going to be over? Reading words I didn't understand, reading things that couldn't really relate to me. The idea of this session is that we should take something away from us. Each Kinnah may not talk to each of you, but hopefully there'll be at least one in there that will talk to everybody and that we can get something from it. So I'm going to first of all ask Rav Mendel. He has chosen Kinnah number 6, Shavat Surumeni. It's on page 153. If you've got an art scroll, it's Kinnah number 6.